So thank you everyone for joining us. I am Nicola from Connect the Dots. We also have Naomi and Sabrina from the Connect the Dots team here helping to run the session in the background. And then from the Dún Laoghaire side, we have Owen from Parks and Landscapes. We'll also be joined by Rory from Parks and Landscapes in a while, and Jim, who is a traffic engineer with DLR. So just before we get into the session, to give you a quick reminder of how the session is going to run. So Owen, after I run through this, we'll kind of spend 30 minutes running through the latest plans for the park and then also some other updates on the project. And then we'll have a Q&A session for about 30 minutes where people can ask questions. So a little bit of kind of housekeeping. So we have it set up that you won't be able to unmute yourself for the session. And if you could please direct your questions directly to Sabrina. We obviously have a lot of people on the call and we want to get through as many questions as we can during the session. So that's just the kind of most efficient way for us to organize the questions, make sure we get through them. And any questions that we don't get to through the session, we will be taking a note of all those and publishing answers to them on the DLR website along with the recording of the session. So just to quickly, if you're not familiar with Connect the Dots, we are stakeholder engagement consultants, and our goal is that on projects that we work on, that we're trying to make sure that communities and stakeholders are kind of at the center of those projects and that they have the opportunity to be involved and to have their say on the projects if they want to. So we were brought onto this particular project last November, and our role at the time was to make sure that the kind of updates on what was happening with the park and the phase 1 development was clearly communicated with the whole community, and then to also take that feedback and report it back to DLR so that they could use that information and take it into consideration in the plans that you're going to see now. And also to say that we are impartial facilitators throughout this process. So we have no vested interest in the kind of outcomes. We just want to make sure that there is those clear lines of communications, and that anyone who wants to have a say has a way to do that. So in January of this year, we ran a couple of different consultation events. Some of you may have been at them. And out of that, we collected the feedback and prepared a report that my colleague Sabrina is going to pop the report into the chat if you'd like to read the full details. But this was used by Owen and the team in DLR in kind of considering revisions to the plans. Now that we've moved into the Part 8 process, our role has changed a little bit in that we are now kind of helping to make sure that everyone knows that the new plans have launched, and let them know what the ways they can have their say on it are. So we've organised this info webinar so that people can ask questions. Owen's going to run through how exactly you can make a submission. And then once the consultation period closes on May 22nd, we'll be taking all of the official submissions that were made and kind of preparing a report and analysis of what that was to go into the Chief Executive report, which Owen will again get into in more detail. So I'll hand you over to Owen now to run through the plans. And just a reminder that please feel free to kind of submit questions to Sabrina in your chat there. You can have an option to send directly to her as Owen's speaking, and then when we get into the Q&A, you can continue to send questions through there. So I'll leave you there, Owen, to go through it.
Thank you, Nicola, and thanks everyone for attending now this evening. Just before I suppose I get into that slide, I might go back one if that's okay. Yeah, no, thanks for everyone for attending this evening and taking the time out of your schedules to be here with us. This is an information session really in relation to the plans, and hopefully by the end of it you will be much more informed about those plans. And please feel free to put any questions or comments you have in the chat function, and we'll try and get through as many as we can this evening. And as Nicola said, if we can't, we will include them in our frequently asked questions to go along with this recording. In terms of a little bit of history of Shanganagh in terms of the plans and the master plan, I suppose. So the master plan was done in 2019, and there was some engagement and consultation locally in Shankill. There was 2 sessions, Q&A sessions and presentations, and there was a very long period of consultation then where interested parties were asked to put in submissions, observations in relation to that master plan. I think it was 3 months in total of a time period. And we had a draft master plan, and then we made some changes to that master plan based on the submissions, observations, and there was a detailed report done, and that was then brought back to the main council and adopted by the main councillors. And we have 3 regional parks that we have master plans for. We have Marley Park, we have Blackrock Park, we have Fernhill Park and Gardens, and then Shanganagh. And the reason for the master plans, I suppose, is to make sure that development doesn't happen in a piecemeal manner. It's planned, it's coordinated, and we have a good framework for the park going forward. And it also allows us to get funding to invest in the park and various elements of that. I suppose balancing and compromising is a big part of that and the master plan process as well. Shanganagh really was was one that had a huge amount of competing needs and demands and requests, and trying to find that balance and compromise for everybody was something that we had to really work hard to do, and we feel like we have done the right thing in development of this master plan. Now, having said that, we did do that extensive consultation in January, and we are proposing a change to the plan, and I'll go through that now in a few minutes' time. But really, the main reason for these plans is to make sure the park is protected and enhanced, and make sure the biodiversity and the trees and the woodlands are all protected and enhanced as well. So it doesn't lead to piecemeal type development, and it's a much better approach to developing and upgrading our parks. And just to give an example of that, if anyone has been up to Fernhill Park and Gardens, that's one that we have, it's in step aside, and that's one that we have put an amount of investment in, and based on that master plan we did, I think in 2017, and we're now on phase 3 of that plan. So if you've been up there, I hope you've enjoyed it, and it's a good time to go up now, actually a very good time to go up if you haven't been up. But what we've tried to do there is always integrate the facilities in a very sensitive manner, and protect and enhance various elements, the gardens and some of the other elements in the trees and the hedgerows and some of the meadows, and then integrate some of the facilities in. So we believe it's a good example of we're showing our track record, and that is the plan for Shanganagh as well, to do it in a very sensitive and meaningful manner. I'm just going to go on now to the revised plans. There were plans in 2021 that were published for Part 8, and following that extensive engagement and consultation in January, we are proposing a number of changes. So going through them here now, the proposed change is to develop 1 multi-use pitch instead of 2. And the reason is to retain more open green space for passive users of the meadow, and to retain the floodlighting on that pitch. And the reason is to increase playable hours to meet demand from local sports clubs, but also to continue the proposal for the sprint track with floodlights, the cricket and baseball area, and the calisthenics, to provide those additional facilities to cater for diverse users of the park. Also to continue with the proposals to upgrade the bridge crossing, integrating play and seating and viewing in order to increase accessibility and inclusivity for all users, particularly young families and older people. And the result of 1 pitch being removed allows a larger area of meadow to be developed with additional tree planting, and acknowledging the consultation and the importance of meadow space for biodiversity and mental health benefits. Sorry, just trying to move this on. So just to explain the plan there on the left is the Part 8 that was published in 2021, December 2021. So the 2 pitches with floodlights and the sprint track here to the north, the amalgamated and shared cricket and baseball here to the south, and the additional tree planting and meadow around the perimeter, in particular tree planting around the east here. Sorry, for context purposes, this here is the dark line where my cursor is showing. And then to increase the improve accessibility over that dark line, integrating natural play and viewing and seating areas, and then some alternative active facilities as well in terms of calisthenics and basketball as well. And in the context of the master plan, there is to be a sports building in this location here, right beside Shanganagh Castle. The new plans that have arisen from that public consultation in January is to develop just one pitch at this location here with floodlights, as you can see at this location. To the north, retain that sprint track with the floodlights. To the south, retain the cricket, baseball shared space, and also keep going with the improvements of the accessibility over the dark line and the viewing space, the natural play, the calisthenics and the basketball. But to create this very large area of meadow here, and with additional tree planting as well as very much a biodiversity zone. Okay. So that then will lead to an amendment to our master plan, and that amendment will be to retain the existing GAA pitches on the front pitch, and upgrade floodlight one of those particular pitches, but also to move the pitches closer together so we can try and retain a pond or attenuation area, and also very importantly create a natural adventure play space at that location as well, improve the play provision in the park significantly. But just to note that this will take place in the future, and it's subject to further assessments and a new Part 8, and it's outside of the current scope of this proposed development. And this is by no means the final version of that master plan. It's a fairly basic layout, just showing the proposed phase 1 facilities in this location here, the pitch and the meadow, just to put it in some context. The 2 GAA pitches at this point retained, but that layout is going to change slightly to have a pond attenuation and have this play space, adventure play in this location. And just to showing it, I suppose, in the context of Shanganagh Castle and that sports building in very close proximity to this space here. So this is a proposed image of from the Castle Farm direction, a bird's eye view of the proposed development. In the foreground here, you'll see the sprint track. This location here, only a 1.2 meter high fence around it to keep things like dogs out, but very much open and accessible for everybody to use, the whole community. The pitch here, with floodlights and with some ball stop netting again, but open and accessible to everybody to use and to walk through and use when it's not being used for the structured team sports. Crucially, I think as well, the integration of these facilities into the park with the tree planting and the meadow around the perimeter. The only grass that will be cut will be maybe some paths, but the grass for the pitch really is the main bit of grass that will be cut. To the background, then you will also see the amalgamated cricket and baseball facilities, and then this large area of meadow here. And just moving on then to the next image that we have here. This is from the the bridge crossing near the dark line, really a bird's eye view again, looking towards the Sugarloaf. And in the foreground here, you will see the improved access over the dark line, the seating and viewing space, the integrated natural play into the slope, the calisthenics and the basketball space, and that very large area of meadow with some paths cut through it, additional tree planting, this attenuation area here, bioretention area here for surface water drainage, and in the background then the pitch and the flood lighting and the sprint track as well. Why have we made these changes and these huge compromises? Well, we did that extensive consultation in January, and Connect the Dots were brought in to help us with that consultation and to try and engage and consult in a meaningful way with all users of the park. But that report did outline conflicting roles that the park plays for different visitors and users. These new plans try to provide access in the park that meets the needs of as many users as we can. And really something that came across very strongly is to retain the pitches at the front of the park. And you know, this was requested by the local community and a lot of the local sports clubs as well. But to retain these pitches is just not enough to meet the demand for the sports facilities in Shankill. And you know, there is huge change coming to Shankill with the residential developments at Woodbrook and Shanganagh Castle, and the Dart Station coming in, and bus connects in the future, and also Shanganagh Castle coming into the park as well. So just to remind people, there is huge change, but also for preserving the green space for passive use and biodiversity is very important as well. Just to go into a little bit of detail on the biodiversity and environmental reports and studies that have taken place over the past months and years really at this stage. So there's a full tree and hedgerow survey undertaken by an independent arborist. There's a full ecological impact assessment and appropriate assessment screening report by another independent environmental consultant with extensive surveys, including bat surveys, large mammal surveys, amphibian and reptile surveys, breeding bird surveys, wintering bird surveys, flora surveys, etc. And there is a lot of detail in those reports that you will see on our websites. And the conclusion is that the proposal satisfactorily addresses the mitigation of potential effects, and there is no significant effects on biodiversity likely. Residual effects on biodiversity are considered to be low, adverse, slight, negative impact, not significant, and short term. And there's been a little bit of discussion in relation to the environmental impact assessment and the requirement for an environmental impact assessment report. And we seek advice. We always seek advice from our planners. We seek advice then from independent consultants as well. So we have sought advice from an independent consultant, environmental consultant in relation to this, and they have completed a screening report in relation to it. And the conclusion is that the project is not subject to an environmental impact assessment, and no environmental impact assessment report is required for it. And this conclusion is based on an objective review of the proposed development, including its characteristics, location, and likelihood of it causing significant environmental impacts. The screening has followed the relevant legislation and has regard to the relevant guidance. In addition, the previous plan was also appealed to on Board Planola for an environmental impact assessment, and on Board Planola had determined that one was not required, and this plan is similar, but the scope of the pitch development and flood lighting is reduced. So just give you an indication of some of the biodiversity and climate action proposals as part of these plans. So the nature-based solution side of biodiversity, so significant restrictions are in place for, are proposed for the floodlights to align with the BAT activities. There's the equivalent of 1 hectare of native tree planting proposed, and the meadow or the area of long grass is proposed to be increasing in size by approximately 0.55 hectares, and then with the pitch itself, it'll be retain all material on site. It won't be importing or exporting any material during its construction in terms of soils, but use of natural and organic fertilizers will only be used in the development and grow-in and management of this pitch. In terms of transport, there'll be additional bike stands provided in the zone. Any barriers at entrances will be removed. But in addition, bus connects will progress in a number of years. And there is that there is that recent shared path that connects to the Old-Bray Road, shared walking and cycling path to the Old-Bray Road. And Woodbrook Dart Station will be developed in the near future as well in terms of flood resilience. It'll be a natural field drainage system replicated on site, and there'll be a bioretention area, but the additional trees planted would also help to attenuate the additional surface water. And in terms of energy, all lighting is LED, and they'll be dimmable, and the flood lighting design has been developed in collaboration with the project ecologists from the very, very start. Parking and traffic measures then. So a traffic and parking report was undertaken initially in December and then updated over a number of months. And that's different, I suppose, to the previous Part 8. There was no traffic or parking report that was done. So this is a new report that accompanies the Part 8 plans and reports. There are a number of proposals, and there is this forum that we had a little discussion about last week with the sports clubs and the residents and ourselves to try and look at setting up a bit of a forum to help to manage any parking in nearby estates and come up with a bit of a plan to discuss that. Development of a travel plan for the sports, and they can communicate that to their club members and also to visiting teams, a parking management strategy for local estates that we could discuss through that forum. Development of further parking as part of the master plan, and there is parking shown in the master plan adjacent to Shanganagh Castle, but crucially encouraging and incentivizing walking, cycling, the use of public transport. And we've had a number of conversations with the clubs in relation to that, and they have some really good ideas. The development of formal drop-off locations and not in the residential areas, and some coach parking likely in Shanganagh Cemetery Car Park. But to note that some temporary parking will be considered adjacent to the current car parking at Shanganagh Castle until the parking at Shanganagh Castle is developed, but also to note it's outside of the scope of this current Part 8. In terms of the time frame for this consultation period, we're in a statutory consultation, as Nicola had alluded to. Started on the 6th of April and it runs until the 22nd of May inclusive. You can submit observations or submissions through those channels outlined below: the survey on the Citizen Space website, Parks consultations at DLR, coco.ie, or written submission by post or in person to DLR offices. And also you can see the plans and all the Part A plans and the reports and the online survey. They're all available to view in person at Shankill Library, at Shanganagh Park House, at our planning department in County Hall, Dunleary, and Dunleary offices in Dundrum also. The next steps then before I bring Nicola in is after the public consultation ends, the Connected Dots will prepare a report on official submissions. We'll include that report in our own Chief Executive's report. That report then is presented to full council with the plans and reports, and the council then vote to approve, reject, or amend plans within 6 weeks of receipt. And the date of that council meeting is yet to be determined. In terms of recent work that has been undertaken in Shanganagh Park, there has been some Irish Water upgrade works to facilitate the housing developments, but also there's been some work to gain access to Shanganagh Castle and the outbuildings, because the normal access has been blocked by the Shanganagh Castle housing development. It's purely for security and maintenance purposes, and it was done in a sensitive manner, and the use of particular matting to protect the tree roots and to minimise any impact that would have the creation of a path in towards Shanganagh Castle. And just to confirm that none of this work is related in any way to these phase 1 plans for the active zone. So I think I'm going to hand you back to Nicola now. Sorry.
Thanks, Owen. So we've got a good few questions coming through. I think one just that I'll address before I hand over to you to chat about the park is people are wondering why we're not having an open chat for this call and why people can't kind of comment themselves. There's a couple of reasons for that. We obviously have a lot of people on the call, and we want to make sure that we are capturing all the questions and getting to answer as many as we can. We also did get feedback on some previous sessions that some people didn't feel comfortable or felt a bit intimidated with the kind of open forum and felt more comfortable with the kind of direct response. So that's kind of why we've decided to do that, just to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and has a chance to have their questions asked. But I will say again, as we said, all of the questions that are asked in the chat, they will be published with answers on the website after the call, so everyone can see exactly what has been asked. And if you have kind of comments that you'd like to make at the stage that we are with the process, they're the kind of comments that we'd encourage people to include in an official submission through the channels that Owen had mentioned, either on the website, the email, or in person. And that means that we can make sure those comments are captured and are part of the feedback that goes into the Chief Executive report. And that Chief Executive report will be presented along with the plans to the full council to kind of make the final decision on what happens with this project. So then, Owen, question for you. So I think these might have come through before you'd addressed it in your presentation, but worth maybe going over it again. People are wondering what was the rationale behind developing pitches on the meadow instead of developing one of the existing pitches. So you might just clarify that again about why it's been decided to amend the master plan.
The original master plan had removed one of the pitches from the front of the park, and we were creating this biodiversity zone at that point, and a meadow and some mounding and a pond area at that location. Now with these new plans we have, and we've listened to the community, we've decided to retain that pitch in the front and create that meadow area over phase 1 where we originally had that pitch. And we've listened to community, we've listened to suggestions and all the feedback that we have got. This is our phase 1 of the master plan, and this zone is where we want to develop initially. We want to proceed also, there's more than just a pitch being developed. There's the cricket and baseball area being upgraded, and there's a sprint track, and there's other amenities being proposed as part of this phase 1. In order to do any work on the existing pitches, it would be subject to further assessments and a new Part 8 likely for any development over a certain threshold and any spend over a certain threshold. So hence why we are trying to progress with the phase 1 in this location.
And then kind of a follow-on question from that, people are just wondering why it is that phase 1 can't incorporate upgrading the existing pitches.
Just because it would require further assessments and surveys and a huge amount of ecology reports and studies in order for us to arrive at that. So hence why we're not progressing with the upgrade of existing pitches as is. Also, I suppose to note that the clubs are very, very limited in terms of pitches and space, and you know, if we were to develop those 2 pitches without a replacement, the clubs would not function, and we would have nowhere for them to go.
We have some questions coming through then as well, just about kind of other facilities that might have been considered within the park, specifically people asking were a skate park or a pump track considered, and also with the basketball platform, would there be scope to add an Olympic handball platform within that?
Well, we will be considering throughout the Part 8s and throughout the development other, you know, minor developments, minor facilities and amenities throughout. As I said, there was a huge amount of submissions, observations, and feedback that came in through the master plan process, and a lot of competing you know, demands and asks. So we've had to try and find that balance and you know, do as much as we could, but also very importantly make sure that the park is protected and the biodiversity and the trees are protected as well.
Great, thanks. We have questions coming in about the plans to make Shanganagh Park a regional park, and just wondering what will be the benefits of that status. Yeah.
So we have currently 6 regional parks in Laoghaire-Rathdown. So they would be Blackrock Park, People's Park, Killiney Hill, Cabintini Park, Marley Park, and Fernhill Park and Gardens. So there are currently our regional parks, and they offer a certain level of facilities normally in terms of public toilets and play. Some of them have active recreation, others don't, but they're maintained maybe to a slightly higher standard than some of the other local parks or district parks. Having regional parks means that, you know, there's a better chance you will get funding from various sources for investment in those parks. And Shanganagh Castle, when it is developed, will provide some of those very important amenities for a park, such as public toilets and, you know, tea rooms, and those gardens around it as well, and other facilities associated with that, and the sports buildings also.
We also have questions coming in about what clubs or what sports might be earmarked to use the new facilities. If you could talk to kind of what the process will be for who will be using the new facilities.
Yeah, so the new facilities will be generally booked through an online booking system, and they'll be shared facilities and available for all local clubs and current users of the park to book. So it'll be very much on a fair and balanced approach, and everybody will have an opportunity to use the facilities. They're going to be higher quality. They can be used. You know, a lot of our pitches are unusable throughout the winter, and facilities are unusable throughout the winter, so they can be used a little bit more throughout the winter months, which makes a huge difference to the clubs and getting people and young people active. I think Rory there has his hand up. If he can, he can come in. I think he wants to come in and say something, if that is possible.
Good evening. Thanks a million for that. And thanks for that, Owen, also. And just welcome to everybody, and we really welcome the engagement on the project. Just to basically pick up on a couple of points there. I'm Rory Owen, Head of Parks in DLR, just in case you're wondering. And I suppose when we undertook the master planning of Shanganagh a number of years ago, what we were trying to do was, as Owen said, make the park more resilient in terms of all of the competing demands that are currently there and will be there well into the future, and to make sure that the park, you know, can cope with that, and that we protect the nature of what's there, particularly the woodlands, biodiversity, the fantastic paths and views and everything else that's there, but also balance that with the huge demand there is in the county for sport, and the fact that we have massive participation at all age groups, boys and girls, adults, everybody in sport in the county. And we have a difficulty in the, I suppose, the number and playability of the pitches that we do have. Now, Owen has talked about some of that, and hence this phase one is to look at providing this particular pitch facility. I think to address who will be using it, I think Owen has answered that, but obviously we work hand in hand with all of the clubs in the county and all of the sports, and also I would say that pitches in a public park are also available for informal use, I suppose, when the you know, formal matches aren't happening there. So it still remains part of the public open space. It's never kind of fenced off or doesn't disappear from view. So in that way, it is always open. We do have we are moving to an online booking system, and that will help us to see what the current usage is and to plan for the future in the facilities that we do have, or any other facilities that we are planning. So thanks, Nicola.
Great, thanks, Rory. Another question then about proposed timelines. If these plans did go ahead, when might you think they would be completed or starting to be constructed?
We don't really know in terms of a time frame for the construction. We're just taking it one step at a time, and it's out for consultation at the moment. We will update certainly in terms of when this is going back to full council for approval, and after that we can update in relation to any timeline for construction. I would imagine it will take some time. It'll probably take 9 months to be complete, but a lot of those works are and some of those works will be minor in nature. There will be also, you know, the pitch itself, it'll be 12 months at least before it is ready for play as well. So there is a bit of a lag period in between.
And we have some questions coming in about the floodlights as well. In particular, do you know how late they might be operating into the evenings? It's
certainly in the Part 8 report, and the details are there. I can't fully remember exactly Monday to Sunday what it is, but I will clarify that, I think, through the frequently asked questions. But just to note that there is restrictions in the floodlights, proposed restrictions with the floodlights to align with any bat activity, so they can't be used during certain parts of the year.
A question then about, you mentioned that temporary parking is being considered. Someone's wondering, is that going to be within the estates, or where would that be proposed?
No, sorry, to clarify, any temporary parking will not be within any of the residential areas. Any temporary parking will be adjacent to the existing car park at Shanganagh Cemetery. That's where we'd be considering some temporary car parking, and that's the only location. And that is, I suppose, in lieu of the parking that is being proposed as part of the Shanganagh Castle development phase. And also, just to note in relation to that parking, it is outside of the scope of this Part 8.
And then some questions coming in about facilities happening in other areas of Dún Laoghaire. So wondering how many pitches, floodlit pitches, are currently being built in Cherrywood. Would you have an answer to that, or is that something we can clarify?
Rory can clarify. Yeah, please do, Rory.
Yeah, can I come in on that, Nicola? Thanks. I suppose it's important to note that we would it's always been part of the process in Shanganagh that we would develop the all-weather pitch across the road in Woodbrook College grounds, and that is a plan that we still have. And we have been in discussion with the Christian Brothers and the Edmonds Rise School Trust and the school themselves for the last number of years on this project. And we would see that as also catering for a huge amount of the sporting activity in the Shankill area, particularly over the winter months. So that is planned. Obviously, that's subject to Part 8. We have at the moment we have grass pitches coming on stream in Picnic Park in Cherrywood. They're not lit pitches, but they are grass pitches, and we will hope to have them up and running in the next week or two, which is quite welcome. We also are we have a pitch project underway in Kilboggart Park, which will involve lighting on the GA pitch there, and we also have a Part 8 just advertised for the Oatlands all-weather pitch in the Oatlands School. So we do have a number of these projects around the county, and again, goes back to my earlier point that we try to innovate wherever possible. And for example, the innovation with the provision of all-weather facilities in schools ensures that we don't have to build these things in our parks. So therefore, we don't have to fence off large areas within the park that become unusable outside of sport time. So that's part of the innovation and part of that provision. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you. A question coming through that a lot of the conversation and questions so far have focused a lot on sports clubs, and what about facilities for younger children who are too young to play sport or might be interested in playing sport, and how is the playground going to cater for those children?
Rory, do you want to come in on this one as well?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to do that. I suppose a big part of what we do in DLR is build play facilities, but not only that, provide parks, neighbourhood parks, public open space that have play, I suppose, opportunities that are closer to home. And we're about to publish. It's good that this question is coming up now. We're about to publish our ambitious play policy. We've spent a number of months, I suppose, preparing and doing consultation of, and what the play policy does is it informs exactly what it says, the policy for play provision in the county going forward. And that includes the Shankill area and the existing playground in Shanganagh. So our ambition with I suppose the future phase of the development of the master plan in Shanganagh is kind of woodland adventure play, and that's shown on the master plan. But at the moment, obviously, we have a successful playground on along the road boundary. And in fact, I was in Shanganagh myself this morning, and I know that there's some repair work and other works going on there at the moment. So we're always open to that. And one of the other thing that the play policy will also cover is not just the I suppose we have 35 public playgrounds at the moment, and maybe 10 or 12 others coming in charge in the next few years. But all we have ambitions in terms of teenage play to look at, areas for informal basketball, maybe skating, and other very informal teenage activities. We have one just gone in Blackrock, and we have ambitions to do something like that in Shanganagh as well. So that will be part of a future phase of the master plan. Thanks, Nicola.
We have a question asking, how does this kind of plan and the investment in Shanganagh Park compare to investment in other parks across the county? And then kind of a similar question of what other facilities, sports facilities or facilities are being considered for other parks within DLR?
I can come in on that again. Happy to answer that question. It's a good question. I suppose it goes back to Owen's point earlier about the status of the parks, and we talked about the Shanganagh Park getting regional park status, and that kind of helps us in terms of the program and getting funding for projects. So every couple of years, with the help of the elected members, obviously, who are integral in the process, we agree a new capital program moving forward, and a certain amount of money is allotted to particular different parks. So, for example, Marley Park would have a figure allotted to various projects within it. Cabinteely has an allotment of money. Also, Shanganagh does. But there's no point in allotting money to the parks unless we have projects to obviously spend them on. And hence, phase one is what we're talking about today. A future phase would possibly look at the play side of things. As you can see, we're constantly investing in paths and upgrading paths. A lot of, I suppose, funding happens in ways that we don't see through tree planting and replacement tree planting and other types of planting schemes within the parks. Other facilities like the dog run and other improvements that we would like to carry out, particularly in terms of drainage. And again, I saw that with my own eyes this morning. Happen within the park. So we're very, and I have to say, I've experienced working in Fingal and South Dublin in the past, but I have to say we have a really good, really good support from our elected members in helping us to ensure that we have the capital funding, which we have secured for Shanganagh. And then our follow through now is to put the projects in place so that we can actually spend that money. So, we do have the money set aside for this project, and if and when we can, have the Part 8, get through the Part 8 process and get into our tendering process, then we will obviously be spending that money. Thanks, Nicola.
A lot of questions coming through then as well, just about the kind of traffic management, particularly from residents in surrounding estates. I'm wondering what are kind of the concrete steps that are being taken to monitor this on an ongoing basis and to make sure that residents aren't going to be impacted by additional traffic.
So again, I suppose I can take this again. We work really closely with the sports clubs on this issue all the time to ensure that, I suppose, number one, their own teams know the rules and know where they should be going and where they absolutely should not be going. But sometimes more importantly, that visiting teams would know the same thing. We will continue that work, and we continue to work hard on that to ensure that I think I've dealt with this issue many times, and a car park can be empty for 80% of the time and then overflowing when all of these activities are happening at the same time. So what we're looking at is providing, if needed, we will look at providing extra temporary in the vicinity of the existing car park, and that may become part of this. I think there are issues in Shanganagh at the moment, for example, with the construction, and I see that there's a lot of parking happening in there, and we're dealing with the contractors in there on that at the moment to try and make sure it doesn't impinge on other activities happening within the park. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that wasn't an issue, and it continues to be an issue, and is an issue in parks all over Dublin, and areas all over the country. I think it should be noted that we have a very good active travel section in Laoghaire-Rathdown, and we work quite closely with them on the active travel routes through the park. And a lot of the master planning in Shanganagh was addressing, I suppose, issues of trying to maximise the opportunity for people to cycle and walk to facilities where possible. And, you know, hence you have the lit shared cycle routes through the park. And again, what we will be doing with this Part 8 is addressing that and trying to maximise the availability. Now, obviously, that doesn't address visiting teams, but we still work with clubs on that to ensure that, you know, parking does not happen in adjacent residential areas, because that's a complete no-no from all of our point of view.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Rory, so we have a proposal to develop this forum, this working group between the council and the sports clubs and the local residents to discuss any issues that may arise relating to traffic or parking, and to meet regularly and to address any concerns or any issues that do arise. And we've committed that we'll be part of that group. And we will, and Jim from our own traffic section is on this call and has been part of this process also.
Great. We have 5 minutes left in the session, so time for a few more questions for you, Owen, but I want to just address some more questions that are coming through in regards to kind of the format of this event. One is wondering why we weren't running any in-person events for this round of consultation. As we are now into that kind of Part 8 process now, there are very specific ways that people can have their say on the plans. So we've decided that this kind of session where people can ask questions about the plans, understand exactly what's being proposed, know exactly what the channels to make an official submission was the best way to do it, and that an in-person event might have been kind of misleading or confusing, and we didn't want people to feel that was an official submission. So that's kind of to answer that question. I can see there are a lot of people who are frustrated and annoyed that we're not having the kind of open chat and allowing people to ask questions in this call. Again, to reiterate what I said at the start of the call, that's the decision we've made to try and make sure we can get through the huge volume of questions that are coming in, as many as we can, and the fact that it was kind of a direct feedback from sessions that some people would prefer this kind of setting. So we're trying to kind of just make sure it's as equitable for everyone and that everyone feels comfortable participating. So one question, Owen, for you was just around the calculation about the additional meadow. You said that there'll be an extra 0.55 hectares, and if you can just clarify what that means.
Yeah, I suppose if you view it on Google Maps, you'll see quite clearly the area of meadow or longer grass. It does not encompass the whole entire field. It's there's a large area cut for the baseball, and there's large areas cut around the perimeter of that meadow area as well, and adjacent to the paths. So the plan in this proposed development is to have the grass pitch mown, but everything around it is to be left unmown and developed as a meadow with some tree planting interspersed. So that's hence how we can get a larger area of meadow in that space. I hope that answers that query.
And then a question just around kind of the plans and how finalised they are. So specifically, sorry, I'm trying to find the specific question here of how malleable are the plans, or are these more or less final designs?
These are the final design. We will be assessing the submissions and observations, and Connected Dots will be doing the report, and the councillors may decide to amend elements of the plans themselves when they are brought forward for approval to full council.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to go through the last of the questions here. People are wondering, will there be a consultation taking place on the revised master plan, or what the process is for that?
Generally, our master plans are brought to full council for approval, and there normally is a consultation process. We have to just it's a non-statutory process, but myself and Marie will just have to clarify that, and we can clarify that through the frequently asked questions. That's okay.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's kind of all we have time for questions this evening. Just to wrap up, to remind people that this session, the recording of the session will be going on the website along with all the questions that we've been gathering in the background and answers to all of those questions. And a reminder that if you do want to kind of make an official comment on the plans, you can do that either on the DLR Citizen Space website. We'll post the links to these in the chat as well, just so you have them handy. You can email parksconsultation@dlrcountycouncil.ie, or you can also in post or in person drop it into the Dunleary offices. And then we also can share in a follow-up email those locations that the plans and the surveys are in, kind of physical locations, if people want hard copies to view as well, or if you know of anyone who might feel more comfortable with hard copies. So thank you very much, everyone. And we'll follow up with those other details before you can view the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate it, and hope you are a little bit more informed before you arrived here this evening. And thanks for participating in the chats and the questions. And we will follow up with the frequently asked questions and answer a lot of those questions that haven't been answered here this evening. So thank you and good evening.